When I first heard about the Sexy Brutale, I automatically brushed it off and assumed it was one of those throwaway Nintendo eShop dating sims. But I decided to try it out despite my initial assumptions about the game, and I'm really glad I did. The game's blunt title belies its nuanced storytelling and mature handling of abstract concepts like grief and regret. This is a puzzle murder mystery game that is less of a whodunit but more of a whydunit. And the game's conclusion turns the whole game on its head as you think about the events of the game and what they might represent given what you know now. The Sexy Brutale caught me off guard because I expected a mindless puzzler, but what I got was a game that was purposeful from its design choices to its musical score. All the game mechanics served the larger narrative in ways you don't realize until the very end. The Sexy Brutale offers an alarmingly poignant depiction of grief. It's emotionally effective, and it shocks you like a splash of cold water to the face once you experience the game's ending. Needless to say, there are spoilers ahead. The Sexy Brutale is the namesake of a grandiose casino and mansion owned by Lucas Bonds, who has invited his close friends to an annual masked ball. You play as Lafcadio Boone, who appears to be stuck in a time loop a la Groundhog Day, that replays the events of the party over and over again at the stroke of midnight. Each guest is mysteriously murdered throughout the evening by staff members, and it's up to Lafcadio to save them. A mysterious woman called the Bloody Girl gives him a mask that grants him powers to break out of the time loop that the guests appear to be stuck in. Every time you save a guest, you discover that they know Lafcadio, though it's initially unclear to what capacity. The game has a stellar soundtrack and sound design that's punctuated by auditory cues that signals a character's death, including a gunshot, the toll of a bell, and glass shattering. You hear these cues over and over again, which culminates into a mind-numbing reminder of who died, when they died, and how they died. The game explicitly tells you that you can't save everyone, even if you try. There are odd things you encounter throughout the game that are left unexplained, like why the masks chase you when you're within the vicinity of another guest, or why there's full-length mirrors dispersed throughout the casino. But at the game's end, you learn that Lucas Bonds has devised an elaborate plan to commit insurance fraud, in which he burns down the casino at the stroke of midnight after his guests have safely evacuated. Lucas desired a calm and suburban lifestyle with his wife, Eleanor, and wanted to use the insurance payout to live the rest of their lives. But in reality, something goes wrong, and the incendiary bombs go off early with all the guests inside. Everyone dies, including Eleanor and their unborn child. The game serves as a visual depiction of Lucas's grief after he unintentionally murdered his friends and his family. All the waitstaff are revealed to be Lucas at different stages in his life, which represent his self-inflicted chronic trauma over the past 40 years. The waitstaff represents Lucas's denial and bargaining as he creates fictional scenarios where each guest dies before the fire. For example, Tequila Belle is impaled by shards of glass after her earth-shattering operatic number, and Willow Blue hangs herself at the bell tower after being possessed by a demon. These are deaths that are fantastical and intricate, the kinds of deaths that can only be conceived in one's imagination. The way Lucas sees it, if his friends die by any other means besides the fire, then he's not at fault for his friends' deaths. Lafcadio Boone, the Golden Mask, and the Red King represent different facets of Lucas's psyche. Lafcadio represents redemption and self-forgiveness. He is Lucas's knight in shining armor. He is conjured by Lucas to go through time and space and save all the guests before their untimely demise. Lafcadio serves as Lucas's avatar throughout the game, since he isn't able to face the events of the game as himself. He needs to be an outsider in order for his delusion to work. This is exactly why every character in the game wears masks. Masks offer a distorted reality, and for Lucas, this offers a degree of separation between him and his loved ones. This is why the masks pursue you whenever you get too close with the characters in the game. The masks feed Lucas's delusion, and whenever you get too close in discovering the truth, they hunt you down. Similar to Pyramid Head from Silent Hill 2, the Golden Mask is the personification of Lucas's self-punishment. He's trapped in a vicious cycle of trauma and guilt. The Golden Mask forces you to watch each of your friends' deaths in agonizing detail through the full-length mirrors that are installed throughout the casino. The purpose of the Golden Mask is to keep the show running. He imposes the time loop and forces Lucas to repeatedly live out the deaths of his loved ones. The Red King, as Eleanor states, is the purest glimpse into Lucas's soul. This is his real self, a weak and decrepit old man who is imprisoned inside a chamber by the Golden Mask. The Red King is the embodiment of Lucas's self-hatred. We as the player see Lucas live through the same trauma in order to atone for his own sins. He believes he deserves the torture inflicted by the Golden Mask, so he lies there in total despondency. For him, there is pleasure to be found in self-destruction. The Golden Mask and the Red King can be interpreted as representations of complicated grief. Here is a definition of complicated grief from the University of Columbia. This is a persistent form of intense grief in which maladaptive thoughts and dysfunctional behaviors are present, along with continued yearning, longing, and sadness, and preoccupation with thoughts and memories of the person who died. Irrational thoughts that the deceased person might reappear are common, and the bereaved person feels lost and alone. Lucas has gone through multiple decades of intense grieving and hasn't been able to live his life fully because of it. The most prominent figure in Lucas's life is Eleanor, his wife, who he envisions as the Bloody Girl. During the final moments of the game, the Bloody Girl tells him he will never have the forgiveness from her or his friends. They're dead, so he literally would never know that they would say those words. But she tells him that Eleanor would never want to impart this much suffering onto Lucas. She pleads for him to forgive himself just enough to move on and carry out the rest of his life. The mansion, or his delusion, has been destroyed and built and destroyed again and built again on rage and pain, all while Lucas was reliving the moments where his friends were murdered. The Bloody Girl begs for his torment to end. And it's up to you as the player to either relive the events of the game and hold on to the delusion, or use the powers of your mask that was given by the Bloody Girl to break out of the time loop, which would grant you access to live the rest of your life. By choosing to move on, Lucas doesn't forget what happened. Instead, he is able to let go of enough pain in order for him to move on. What I love about the ending is that it doesn't totally let Lucas off the hook. He did a terrible thing and put the lives of his friends and family at peril for a reckless and selfish decision. He does deserve to suffer, and the game acknowledges that. But what he doesn't deserve is constantly reliving the trauma of watching his loved ones die over and over again. He doesn't deserve forgiveness, but he deserves to move on. And I'm glad that this game's story possessed the emotional maturity to acknowledge someone's unforgivable actions, but treat them with enough mercy to know when they've gone through enough suffering. Because of that, the Sexy Brutale subverted my expectations of the game, and even gave me an emotional and realistic depiction of someone living with complicated grief.